to our automated phone system, powered by Asterisk. If you know about Asterisk, press 1. If you do not, press 2. Otherwise, please press. If you would like to see a comprehensive tutorial on the Asterisk PBX, please press 1337. Welcome to System.
You've probably heard a lot about voice over IP or VoIP, but what you may not have heard of is the open source VoIP telephony toolkit called Asterisk. I'm joined here today with John Todd, who is an active contributor to the Asterisk community.
Hi.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
So tell me exactly, I mean, I've heard of Vonage, I've heard of Skype, I've used all these services, but I haven't used Asterisk yet. How does this differ and what can we do with it?
Sure. Asterisk really is different because it's not a service. Asterisk isn't like a Skype or a Vonage where you're buying or using a service that's supplied by someone else. You're actually doing those services such as voicemail and music on hold and forwarding and all this other neat stuff. You're doing it on your own server.
Okay.
So Asterisk is an open source implementation of all of these features that those products may give you, but you're actually running it yourself and you control the code and you control the way things work.
So this is something that if I had an extra computer laying around the house, I would use that as the Asterisk box, and
Yep.
it runs on... Now, is this a Windows-based app, or is this only just... I know it runs on Linux. Is that...
Right now, it is really a Unix-based application. It runs on Linux, BSD. It has been ported to Windows, but I'd suggest running it on Linux first before you get your feet wet too far into any other operating system.
Still a little buggy on Windows, then?
That would be a light way to put it, yeah.
Okay, so tell me exactly what we can do with this. I mean, you said... You talked about some of the voicemail features and things like that, but where's the power in Asterisk?
Sure. Really, Asterisk is a toolkit. And so what it gives you is the ability to connect different types of telephony systems together. It will connect, there are various different drivers for connecting existing PSTN lines like you've got in your house right now, your analog, your old copper lines, voice over IP phones with different protocols such as Sip and H.323, as well as run applications that all connect all those together, such as conference rooms, an IVR system, announcements, database integration to your existing tools. It's really kind of a broad set of things you can do with Asterisk.
Skype can't do that.
No, it can't. So Asterisk is really the geek's tool for telephony, and it's really attractive to people who already build their own systems at home already, and so it's growing quite quickly.
Very cool. So let's talk about just the basics of it first, the VoIP side of things.
Sure.
If I just want to place a phone call using Asterisk, what would I go about setting up, and how does that work?
Okay. Most people, when they initially try to get Asterisk working, they're looking to essentially increase the capacity of their home phone system. Okay. They've got say, an answering machine, or they've got an answering service, and they want to kind of turbocharge that. And Asterisk can do that, and that's kind of the first step that most people take in implementing Asterisk. So what they'll get is they'll get some type of device which allows them to convert their home phone line into voice over IP signaling, typically using the SIP protocol. Okay, so you're keeping your existing home copper line. That's right. You're still paying for that service, but you want a way to convert it to VoIP. That's right. So why wouldn't you just get rid of the copper line altogether, though? Well, for starting out, you probably want to retain services such as 911 dialing, and you probably also want to keep your existing line pointed meaning your existing phone number pointed at some device that you control instead of porting it away to some other provider. Gotcha. At least as you get familiar with the protocol, so that if things totally melt down, you can unplug the wire and plug it right back in your own phone, and you're back the way you started. And that's important when you live with other people in the house and who, let's say, they're less pleased when she can't make phone calls at 3 in the morning. Yes. So no, it's good to have a backup to start with. Okay, so what do I need to get started then from a hardware standpoint? Sure. Really, to get started, I recommend something like this, which is the Sapura, the Sapura 3000. The Sapura 3000 has Ethernet on one side, and it has 2 phone line ports on the other. Okay. Now, these are slightly different from each other in that one of these ports connects to your existing phone line that comes in from your carrier, your SBC or Verizon or whoever your carrier is. And then the other line goes to a standard plain old analog phone. Okay. So what this device does is it converts between those two things, between the analog phone line that comes in from your house and a standard phone set. But it allows all the packets to flow through the Ethernet first. So it's going through Asterisk first. So you're essentially what's called hairpinning all of your calls through this device into Asterisk and then back out another port. Okay.
So why take it back out the other port? I don't understand. So you basically you're plugging in a standard phone line and then converting it. Then why kick it back out of the standard port again?
Well, you have to have something to talk on. You've got to be able to actually have a telephone to talk on.
Telephone,
that's right. One of these, standard $10 telephones that you get from Radio Shack or whatever you've got in your house already, you can plug right back in here. So that's how a lot of people convert their houses, is that they'll essentially cut the wire as it comes into the house, plug it into here, then plug their house into the other port.
Gotcha.
So now their whole house is running on this system. This is what's actually providing the dial tone for every phone in the whole house.
That's really cool. And you don't have to go and rewire the house or anything that. I mean, you use just the existing...
Right. And now you've got this magic in between, and the magic is that you've got Asterisk in there doing things that you can actually reroute the calls, not necessarily over your PSTN line, but you can make them go in different directions. And you can do different things with the inbound calls as well from your existing carrier. So that's really the power of having a device that converts between both.
Gotcha.
What we call FXS and FXO. FXO being typically what connects to your carrier. FXO stands for Foreign Exchange Office, and FXS, which is what these devices are FXS devices, and this stands for Foreign Exchange. I'm going to have to take that one over because I don't remember the name of this. Foreign Exchange Stations. Sorry.
No worries.
So these are Foreign Exchange Station devices, and they plug into, and meaning that they require a dial tone on the wire.
You brought a lot of equipment with you here today. And I know that there's some really cool things that we don't have time to really dive into because there's just so much that you can do.
Yeah.
But let's talk about some of this equipment and some of the really cool things if you really want to geek out later on.
Sure.
What you can do.
Well, I mean, really geek out is, again, that's a matter of magnitude because you can certainly get way over your head with Asterisk as far as all the things it can do. This device here is the Polycom, one of the nicer phones in the market right now. Speakerphone. It can do presence, so that if there's another extension off hook somewhere in the house, it will light up a button so that you can see who's off hook. It has an XML display, XML controllable display, so that you can display, you can essentially do web integration with this device through Asterisk or independently, and it'll draw pictures or do pretty much whatever you want through the interface. This is one of the lower end Cisco units, still fairly nice, a little less expensive.
I've seen a lot of Cisco stuff. They're doing a lot of advertising, a lot of ad campaigns.
Sure, Cisco is really pushing their desktop stations. Cisco is still not quite completely SIP capable in their internal switch system, but these phones are SIP capable, and really that's the protocol that we use with Asterisk the most. As far as the commodity items like this, these work great. They're really indestructible phones, and they're, as you've seen, they're quite broad spread, so widespread rather. So you can find them used fairly frequently.
Okay, so is Cisco really pushing these phones to be connected to Asterisk boxes, or do they want to use their own proprietary technology?
No, they're definitely not pushing them to be connected to Asterisk boxes. They have their own call control system. Although, interestingly enough, Asterisk, some of the developers with Asterisk have backwards engineered that proprietary protocol, so now Asterisk supports that in some limited way as well.
Nice, that's great.
So that's the nice thing about open source, is that you can create all these different components and then stick them in, and there's no one that has a business issue to prevent you from doing that. So
that's great.
Now we're trying to integrate as many different types of channels or protocols into Asterisk as possible, whether they're proprietary or open.
Okay. So what are these guys right here?
Sure. These are essentially slightly modified versions of this, where these are called analog terminal adapters. In fact, all of these are called analog terminal adapters because they take an analog phone line and they convert it into IP. This one happens to be it has a DSL integrated in it. This is again another 2-line unit, a little less expensive. And this is actually yet another version of an analog terminal adapter. It's a single port version, very small and compact. This is made by the same company that actually does a lot of work with Asterisk, so it runs a slightly different protocol called IAX. Again, here's another one of Cisco's devices, again, 2-port analog terminal adapter. The trick to watch out for is, though, if you're going to be doing something to start with, there are many 2-port analog adapters, but the ones that have FXO and FXS are the ones you're going to want to buy if you want to connect it up to your existing house wiring, the existing wire that comes in from your carrier. Okay. Most of these are just 2FXS, meaning that they have 2 phones. They can support 2 phones like this, but they can't connect to the house analog wiring.
Right, which is what you want if you want the entire house wired.
Yeah, if you want to essentially put this in as a tap, essentially.
How much is something like that going to run?
These are about $100. The Super is about $100. Some of these others are ranging in the $70 or $80 range. These you can find used on eBay, I'm sure, for probably in the $60 to $70 range, if not less now. I would be careful actually with this one in particular. This is the Cisco, a nice box, but some of them are locked because they're used by Vonage. People are selling off their old Vonage boxes, and you can't actually reuse them for Asterisk because they're hardware locked to the system. So careful with what you buy. Keep your eyes open, and I guess do some reading up on the different types of adapters before you pick one up that you don't know about.
We'll definitely put some links in the show notes too, so that people can get links to the sites that sell these. Now this, I have to tell you were showing me this before. This is what I'm sold on. I love this little phone. I mean, it looks like a cell phone. It's the same size.
Sure.
But it's a little different.
Sure. That's a Hitachi IP5000, and that is actually just a Wi-Fi chipset stuck into a cell phone body. So right now, what we did is I turned it on here in the studio, and it immediately found an access point and essentially registered my number with our Asterisk server back in the office. So within about 5 seconds of powering it up, I could make phone calls out on our office PBX, and it shows my voicemail indicators and everything else.
So you just walk around with this wherever you go, and it's constantly scanning, looking for open access points. It finds one, and instantly, like someone could call you too at the same time, right?
Yeah, sure.
It would just ring.
Inbound and outbound works. It sends a beacon every 90 seconds to my Asterisk server saying what its IP address is, so that inbound calls know how to get back to it.
So you're telling me basically when Google rolls out their free Wi-Fi in San Francisco, I could walk around with this thing, it would connect to my Asterisk box, and then I would no longer need my cell phone.
That's right. You could have your home phone essentially ringing on that no matter where you happen to be sitting, as long as you're in an open Wi-Fi spot.
And it would be free.
And it would be free.
That's good. I like that. That's awesome. So tell me what this, we didn't cover this here. What does this say?
The other option for connecting analog devices to your Asterisk server is actually to do it the old-fashioned way, where you actually have a card installed in your server. This is a Digium TDM400 card, and what this has is it has daughter cards on it, which are either FXO or FXS. You can have up to 4 ports. So you can either have 4 individual phones or different phone, networks of lines in your house, or have 4 inbound lines. These are typically used by businesses who say have 4 different phone numbers. They don't want to move away from their old copper infrastructure, but they want to use Asterisk advanced features. And they'll get 4 FXO lines so they can get all 4 of their inbound lines ringing through, and then they convert that into SIP, and they've got then desk phones like this or this spread out around the office.
Gotcha.
But they actually want to have the 4-port density inside the Asterisk server itself. So this is a product from Digium, the folks that do a lot of sponsorship and work on the Asterisk project.
Excellent. Well, we have so much to cover today. We do want to build and show the users at home how to do something actually, we're going to put together a box right now. We're going to install Linux. We're going to get it set up and show users how easy it is to get this started.
Okay.
So let's clear off some of the stuff and get a computer out here and start building.
Great. Let's get to it.
All right, so we cleared out all the hardware, and now we're going to get started putting together our Asterisk box. What type of features are we going to put into it today?
Sure. Well, the features we're going to try today are actually pretty simple. The first thing we're going to do is that we're going to try to get this phone talking through this device to our Asterisk server to hear an announcement, essentially a welcome message.
Okay.
Second step is to get Asterisk talking to this, going through the other port, talking out to our phone line from the phone company.
Okay.
And then the third step is that we're going to do voicemail systems, so that we do regular voicemail as well as voicemail to email.
Oh, very cool.
And then the last step is that we're going to sign up for and implement an ITSP, or an Internet Telephony Service Provider, that will allow us to terminate calls out onto the phone network at large, except using the Internet as our delivery mechanism to get those calls to that service provider.
Gotcha. Excellent. Well, what type of hardware does it take to get something like this started? I know that a lot of people will wonder, do they need to go buy a brand new P4 machine or an AMD machine?
No. Pretty much anything you can pull out of the back closet or from under your desk somewhere that's got dust collecting on it is fine. A P3 400 is typically sufficient for a home user, and 256 megs would probably be overkill even for
really? That's it?
Yeah, and at the most, 1 or 2 gigs of disk is all you're going to need.
So this is an eBay $30 and you're done?
Flea market special, yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So what type of, now you have the computer, all the components, we need to buy one of these boxes here.
Sure.
And then we also need broadband connectivity.
Right. So let's talk about the broadband connectivity for a second. You should at least have 128K upstream.
Okay.
It is possible to use some codecs over some dial-up connections, but realistically, I would not try that as a beginner, and it usually gives poor results. So broadband is really kind of mandatory for voice over IP at any decent quality speed. You should look for a provider that has low jitter and packet loss. Jitter is really the killer for voice over IP. Latency isn't that bad unless you're going over a satellite, as most people don't notice even a couple of 100 milliseconds of delay. But jitter is the big issue. Make sure that your provider is good and steady between them and some fairly common points out on the internet. But most cable and DSL providers do a decent job of that now. How
much bandwidth, if we're making placing a single line call, are we going to be using?
Well, there are different ways that you can encode or transcode the call into less bits per second. However, we're going to be using G711, which is the most common codec, and it's what's called toll quality. And that is 64 kilobits per second of actual audio data, but when you incorporate the packet headers and everything, it usually works out to be about between 80 and 82 kilobits per second in each direction for both transmit and receive.
So then off a standard cable modem or DSL line, you could probably have two ongoing conversations at the same time?
You probably could. Depends on your cable provider and depends on what your upstream bandwidth is, but I regularly do it on a cable modem with no problem with two channels with G711 codec.
Now, if you went, I know that some providers out there will charge a little bit more if you want a higher upstream. If you were willing to spend the extra money, could you have multiple lines where you have 5, 6 different lines all coming out of the same box?
Easily. That's really, if you've got the bandwidth, that becomes then a function of how much you want to pay some service provider to actually deliver that capacity to you. If you're running it, of course, between two Asterisk servers, of course, it's free and doesn't cost you that much at all. So the last comment I'll make on broadband service providers is that if you are doing an Asterisk installation for the first time and you have an opportunity to get a static IP address, I would really suggest doing it on a static IP address. It's a public IP address. While not required, it just simply makes things a lot easier when you start to try to get things working from outside, meaning on the global internet, talking back into your Asterisk server.
Most ISPs extra $5 a month or something like that. It's a done deal.
And I want to discourage people if they're natted or if they're behind some type of firewall. It still will work, inside your house as long as everything's on the same subnet. But it just gets more difficult if you're trying to make things go back and forth through a firewall or a NAT. So I suggest, as the beginner, I would stay away from that type of architecture to make your life a lot easier.
Sounds good. Now, as far as, so let's get into configuring this. So basically, if someone wants to set this up, we have the machine, we just hooked it up, we put a fresh installation of Linux on there. You put Red Hat,
I put Red Hat because it was easy. I had the disks in my bag, but any installation will work. Debian, Slackware, pretty much any of the common distributions will work. It'll also work on BSD, and I also have it running on Mac OS on my laptop, so that's kind of interesting.
Oh, you can do it on OS X then?
Sure. So really, to get it installed and running is actually pretty trivial. You'll first need to make sure that you've got the kernel sources installed if you want to do some of the more advanced features. So when you're installing your Linux distribution, select all and make it do everything. There are good and bad functions to that, but that's kind of outside the scope of this discussion.
4 or 5 disks.
Yeah, that's right. How long does it take, and what security holes does it open, and depending on what distribution you're running. But
you may get the GIMP editor that you don't need.
That's right. But so then, really, what you do is you'd go into user circ usr/src, create a directory called Asterisk, go to the asterisk.org website, and there's some instructions there that are pretty clear into the download section. It's exporting your CVS root variable. You'll see how to set that on the site. CVS login. The password is anoncvs. Do a CVS update, which fetches all of the Asterisk source code. So CVS update Asterisk. Then cd into the Asterisk directory. Type make. Wait for it to compile. Type make install. Wait for it to install. Then type make samples, and it will install a bunch of sample files into etc Asterisk, which is where we're going to be editing files in just a few minutes as we start to configure this box and get everything running.
So all in all, it's pretty easy to set up. I mean, as long as you just follow the instructions step by step.
It's quite easy. Okay. It's quite easy.
And now you've opened up a configuration file.
Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is, or the first thing we're going to do really, is that we're going to try to get this device. We're going to try to give this device an identity so that it can talk to Asterisk and Asterisk can talk to it.
Okay, so this device again converts your standard analog phone line. It'll convert it into SIP then, right?
It's converting into SIP. Now, SIP stands for Session Initiation Protocol, and SIP has really been a strong protocol as far as for the last 4 years or so has been gaining a lot of speed, and it's now mostly the de facto standard. So SIP is a way of signaling between two devices, whether they want to signal voice over IP, video, instant messaging, and a whole bunch of other things that are using SIP. We're only going to be using this for voice over IP.
This is the same thing that Vonage uses.
That's right. Yeah, they use SIP as a standard protocol. It's actually what most of the devices that we had out here earlier, they're all speaking SIP.
Okay.
Asterisk supports more than just SIP, though. Asterisk supports H323, which is an older standard. It supports IAX, which is actually a really interesting protocol that's only good between two Asterisk servers, but it has some interesting advantages, kind of for the advanced users, so we won't go into that too much. It supports Cisco's proprietary protocol. So there have been some backwards engineerings, I think I mentioned earlier.
Any lawsuits yet? Or
no, the DMCA explicitly allows backwards engineering to help out for compatibility. So there's some interesting loopholes there. There's also things which will allow you to connect your sound card to speakers, as an example, for overhead paging. There's all kinds of different channel drivers to take sound in and out of Asterisk.
Okay.
And the nice thing about Asterisk is it treats them all the same. Once you've gone through one of these drivers, which is what the Sip.conf file is, which is what we're going to be editing here, once you've treated the media through one of these channel drivers, it becomes identical. All of the channel formats really are treated the same way, so that whether you're sending a call out of an analog port through one of the PCI cards that Digium sells, or whether you're sending it out through a SIP channel, the dial plan and the configuration files, you don't have to mess with them. They're all treated identically, which is very nice. It's kind of a genericization of, if that's a word even, of all of your telephony endpoints within the one system.
Okay.
So right now what we're going to do is we're going to configure the SIP channel. We're going to give this Sapura 3000 device an identity, so that when it needs to talk to Asterisk, number one, it knows where to go, and vice versa, so that we know where to go for this. We're going to give it essentially a username and a password, and configure some other parameters about it.
I was going to say, the first thing when I was looking through this file, it's big.
It's huge.
There's a lot of
enormous.
options in here.
There are hundreds of options, it seems like. Don't get afraid of that, because they're really, most of the options in here you're never going to use. There are so many different pieces of equipment out there, and there are so many standards, some of them good and some of them kind of very infrequently used, that Asterisk has, of course, as in many open source projects, has been collecting these different knobs to turn, and a lot of them are just never used. So we're going to go down to and look at a few of these options, the ones that we're really going to care about, and we're going to have hopefully an example that kind of narrows down the options which we're going to be looking at.
Okay.
So for this device, there's really only 4 or 5 different things we're going to be looking at. So we're going to describe it. It's going to be called, we're going to be calling this device Sapura 1, just to pick a name out of the hat. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to describe what kind of device is this, and that's called the type identifier. The type identifier says, are we going to be sending calls to this device only? Are we going to be receiving calls to this device only? Or are we going to be sending and receiving?
Right.
And of course, for this device, even on both ports, we're going to be sending and receiving calls.
Right. So the one port is hooked to a standard phone.
That's right. So
sending and receiving. The other port is going to go to the wiring of your house?
The other one's going to go to the wire coming in from your carrier.
Right.
The one that already exists coming in from the street.
Gotcha.
So we're going to be accepting and making calls on both of those ports. So in other words, this phone we're going to be able to pick up and dial a number.
Right.
So Asterisk is going to be receiving a call. And then also Asterisk is going to have the ability to place a call to this phone to make it ring. So we're doing both. So the type method for that, to be able to both send and receive calls, is called friend. Don't ask me why that nomenclature got used. Asterisk, again, has kind of got some interesting...
back and forth communication.
Yeah, there's a lot of Easter eggs in Asterisk, let me tell you. So friend is what we're going to be using for the type.
Okay.
The next thing we're going to be describing is the context. And the context is essentially a pointer, which says when we receive a call, in other words, when an inbound call comes in from this device, where do we send it in the call processing language inside of the extensions.conf file? We'll get to extensions.conf in just a minute, but that is the description of how we handle the call. Do we pick up the line? Do we play voicemail? Do we hang up the call? What do we do with it? So extensions.conf is the programming sequence of how we handle the call. The context is the point within that file that we're going to jump to. So we can have different devices going to different places. As an example, in our Sip.conf file, we're going to have these devices going to a context called phone 1, because this is going to be, we're just going to describe this as phone 1.
Okay.
And so we want to have the phone 1 context being called when this device sees a call from this unit. The next thing we're going to do is that we're going to describe a secret. The secret essentially tells us what the passphrase is that this device is going to use to communicate to Asterisk. You want to have some type of authentication. You don't want to leave things open.
Right.
So we're going to have a shared secret between this and Asterisk, and we're going to essentially make that up.
Set a good password.
Sure. The next thing in there is going to be the host line. Now, host is one of really two things. Typically, you're either going to set the host to dynamic or you're going to set it to an IP address, the word dynamic. We're going to be setting it to an IP address because all of this equipment is going to be on the same subnet in our little LAN here. But when you set it to dynamic, that allows you to automatically have devices kind of phone home every time they get powered up. There's a process called registration, and when I described that little Wi-Fi device to you, when I said we can move around between different Wi-Fi access points.
Right, the little phone we showed earlier.
Every time we do that, we're going to be changing IP address. Well, Asterisk, or whatever the device is that this Wi-Fi phone is talking to, Asterisk, is going to have to know what the IP address is of that Wi-Fi phone as it moves around on the network.
Right.
So every 90 seconds or every 5 minutes or however long you describe, you can register back with the Asterisk server. And so if we have host equals dynamic, that means that every time this Wi-Fi phone registers, the IP address changes in Asterisk's mind. It knows that phone has moved between IP addresses. For a home network, I would suggest you set them statically so that you always send the calls or receive the calls from the same IP address every time. It's a little bit of an extra security, and it's also a little bit easier to debug, so you don't have to have this registration process be how to send calls and receive calls.
Gotcha.
The next thing we've got here is going to be DTMF mode. DTMF mode is actually important because it tells Asterisk how to interpret touch tones. If you don't need touch tones, then this isn't important to you. However, there are different types of encoding for audio. We're going to be using toll quality audio, meaning that it's as good as you can get, but a lot of providers and a lot of Asterisk servers will accept only lower bandwidth codecs, meaning smaller amounts of packets down in the 30 kilobits per second range instead of the 80 kilobits per second range. When you compress audio, though, if you have touch tones in the audio, the touch tones get garbled because you're compressing them in a lossy compression.
Call someone that has a directory that you have to get through with the touch tone.
That's right.
And it decompresses it on the back end, and it doesn't sound right. It's not going to work.
It's going to get the wrong tone or no tone at all.
Right.
So there is an RFC from the IATF called 2833, and that describes how touch tones should be moved across RTP streams, which is what voice over IP uses.
So how do they do it?
So what happens is, when you've got RFC 2833, when you press a touch tone on this phone, this device hears it, and what it will do is it will actually squelch the audio. It will stop playing the audio through the packet stream in this direction. So then what it does is it inserts special magic packets that say what touch tone was pressed. Let's see, if you press the digit 3, you'll get an RFC 2833 stream of packets which say 3 was pressed.
Right. The receiving device must know that then too, right?
That's right. So they both have to be working on RFC 2833. It receives those packets that say touch tone 3 was pressed, and it actually then plays out the other side of the connection, whatever the other connection happens to be. It will play the touch tone back, so you're essentially proxying the touch tone through that way. And that's really, really important because there are a couple different ways of moving touch tones around. RFC 2833 is the most common and usually the best way to do it.
And do all the providers that you connect up to for your voice VoIP service, do they all support this, the 2833, or do you have to check?
No, I haven't found any that don't.
Okay.
So that's a pretty good bet.
Okay.
So that's really all we need for this particular peer that we've created, or this particular SIP unit that we've created. So we're going to set it up, and then we're going to try to go into extensions.conf and get our first part of the test working, where we can hear a welcome message.
Okay.
So give us a few minutes, and we'll get that set up.
Sounds good.
So we've got the Sip.conf file all done now, and what we've just done is we've configured this device, the Sapura, to take the phone line, meaning the line that's connected to the phone, and actually we've matched that up with the settings in the Sip.conf file. So we went into the web interface on this device, and there are a few settings that we set, which was essentially telling this device what the IP address was of the Asterisk server, what the username was for this device, or at least this line of this device, the password, and then we also turned off some things like so that this is able to make calls without registering.
Okay.
Just some additional, a couple little flags we set. They should be in the configuration files, which are online.
All right.
So now that this device is supposedly talking to Asterisk, really the test is going to be, how do we get the calls from this and have them do something.
All right.
So Sip.conf and this are now kind of operating as a single entity, where this is sending the calls into the Sip channel. Now we have to say, remember we defined a context, and the context we defined is called phone 1, and here we've got it on the screen. Phone 1 is an extremely simple context inside of the extensions.conf file. It's really only got 4 what are called priorities. The call is being handed into this portion of the dial plan in extensions.conf with a phone number that has been dialed. So you pick up this phone and you dial a number. So this platform tries to match on the number that is being dialed. That's how it actually processes things through the extensions.conf file.
Okay.
So we have essentially a line here that says extend equals greater than. Now after that, we have what some of you may recognize as a regular expression of some sort, or at least a wildcarding system. Anything that starts with an underscore means that after that character, you're expecting to find a wildcard system. Capital X stands for any number 0 through 9, and period stands for any other sequence of numbers. So this right now, this is an extremely simple context. We wanted to catch every number that was dialed and execute these 4 priorities in order. So we essentially said any number string with any number of numbers in it, at least 1 digit long, will execute these 4 priorities in order.
Right, so it's going to go down the list through each of these commands and perform those.
And then if there's a hang up anywhere in there, it will actually just zero out and actually dump out of the routine.
So the first command is the answer one, right?
So the first thing that happens is an answer, meaning that the Asterisk server sends back an acknowledgement using SIP saying, I'm ready to take this call. I accept the call, and it negotiates what type of audio compression it's going to use and all these other things which describe the media flow over IP.
Okay.
The second thing we do is actually we settle the call for 2 seconds. We wait for 2 seconds. Interestingly enough, voice over IP happens so quickly that very often the chips and the analog portions of these systems don't catch up before the audio starts flowing.
2 second break then.
Right, so we just kind of wait around, let the audio find its way in both directions. Then the next thing we do is we play back a file. The file called TT Monkeys is a file that comes actually included with Asterisk, along with a whole bunch of other really amusing sounds. I use it a lot for my test jigs because people like to hear the monkeys for some reason. Got lots of stories about people spending hours listening to the monkeys. I don't know why. So we've got this playback, and the playback file, or rather command, does exactly what you think it does. It plays back a file.
Okay.
These are in GSM format, but Asterisk has a whole bunch of different interpreters, so it can interpret WAV, GSM, and a whole bunch of other different file formats that's saved.
So that's going to give us our confirmation that it's actually working, because we'll hear it come over the phone.
That's right. And then the last thing we do after the file has been completed, it hangs up the line. It does what you think it does. It hangs it up. So give it a try. Pick it up.
All right, so it's running right now.
It's running right now.
All I have to do is dial any number. It's going to find because the wildcards are set. It's going to answer.
So dial a number. Let's dial your cell phone number, or dial some number that you like.
All right, so now, there it is.
There it is. Okay, so it successfully completed the call.
Okay, the monkeys.
Yeah. All right. So the next step, now that we've got it dialing from this phone into here, into Asterisk, we're going to put the other half of this equation in place. We're going to try to hook up the PSTN line, meaning the line that you've got out to your provider. We're going to try to get that to go into here so that when you call in from the outside world, it will go into here and into Asterisk. And then after that, we can start to connect them together within Asterisk using the dial plan.
All right.
So the next step is to get the line, and we'll hook it up.
Let's do it.
Okay.
All right, so we've hooked up our local phone line here.
Right.
And you did a little bit of configuration on the web interface there.
Right. So this line comes in from, in our case, it comes in from SBC with your home phone line on it. So we plugged it into here, went to the web interface again, and configured the PSTN line. So now we've got this box configured so that this PSTN line, whenever it gets an inbound call, will automatically route that call to the Asterisk system. And we've added in the Sip.conf file, we've added a description of this line, we've called it line 1, so that the Asterisk server can then do something with it and pass it into the extensions.conf file.
Okay.
So right now we have it configured. We've added 2 other lines in extensions.conf that essentially are 3 lines that are extremely simple. And what we've just set up now is so that if you call in on this line, it will play back the same audio files. You want to give it a try from your cell phone?
All right, so I have my cell phone. I'm going to call our local number here. And if it works, you have it set up to play back the monkeys,
Play back the monkeys again.
All right, so it's connecting right now.
1 ring.
There we go.
Okay, great.
All right.
Great. So the next thing we're going to do, now that we've proven that we can actually get in from this line and connect to the Asterisk server, and we've proven that we can get in from this phone and connect to the Asterisk server, now we're actually ready to start doing the neat stuff.
Okay.
The ugly parts that involve wires and configuration of this device, they're pretty much over. So we're going to go into extensions.conf again here, and I'm going to uncomment some of the uncomment some additional lines here. And what we're going to have it do, I'm going to comment out these 3 lines.
Because we're done testing now.
We're done testing.
No need for that.
So I'm going to uncomment these lines that talk about dialing through. So we now have uncommented 3 more extensions. And what they're doing is they're matching on This device, when we call in on the PSTN line, is actually saying that it's going to dial. It's dialing a string. It's saying it's passing the caller ID, or not, I'm sorry, not caller ID, but dialed number is going to be home phone line. So we're matching on home phone line. And then the first priority we're going to do is going to be dialing back out on a SIP channel to this essentially the same device but a different port. So, and we've described that device as Sapura 1. So it's Sapura 1 at Sapura 1, and we're going to dial that number for 10 seconds. And if there's no answer in 10 seconds, then we're going to jump to the second priority, which essentially sends us to voicemail. And there's going to be a very generic greeting, and you'll be able to send your greeting.
This is really easy to set up. Is that all you have to do for voicemails, just to add that line?
There is one more thing. We have to go into the voicemail.conf file and add the description of the line 1 voicemail box. And here we've got it as line 1, and then the first, your password right now at the moment is 1234.
Okay.
It actually has a place for your name. That's actually used in a kind of an interesting application. There's what's called a directory function. And if you want to have a company directory, you can actually spell out someone's name with the dial pad, and it will look through the voicemail file, and then we'll dial your extension or give back the response of your extension.
And then you can put your email address in there.
And then you've got your email address to send the voicemail to email conversion. It automatically does that.
So it's going to save, what is it, just a standard like WAV file, and then send it as an attachment through SendMail out of the Asterisk
That's exactly right. In fact, it stores it in several different formats, and you can choose which one you'd like to have attached.
Oh, nice. Okay, so can we test that now then? So you have to uncomment those lines. Did you save those changes?
I've uncommented. I've saved the configuration. I'm going to reload Asterisk, and you should be able to do it. So give that call again, and we should hear this phone ring.
Now, once this phone does ring, it's going to wait 10 seconds if we don't pick up,
That's right.
Okay, so...
More or less 10 seconds. The counter isn't quite exact.
And so after it... then it'll go down to the next line, which is then to activate the...
There we go. We're playing voicemail. So there you go. Now if we leave a message...
So just leave a message right now. It's recording this, so you can see on the screen it says format wave, and I'll hang up the phone.
Hang up the phone. It actually will wait for a few seconds of silence. If it's not able to detect an actual change in the voltage of this wire, it actually is smart enough to know that there's no one left on the line.
Right.
There we go. It's hung up the line. And now it's sent that mail message to you, and it should be in your inbox.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
Now, there's also other things you can do with voicemail. As an example, it can send a header message to you with just a few bits of information and send it to your pager. So a totally different address, it'll send you a notification. You can have, there's a web interface that's actually in part of the add-ons for Asterisk, so you can check your voicemail over the web, and it will delete it right from the system.
Oh, that's awesome.
And of course, then there's another application which allows you to dial into the system and retrieve your voicemail the normal way, which is to go through an application where you type in your password and retrieve your messages and delete them online.
Gotcha, very cool. So now, how hard is it to set up like multiple mailboxes or different options? If you want to press 1 to go to this mailbox or press a different option?
Sure, that's called an IVR, and it's actually very, very easy to do an IVR with an Asterisk. Essentially you describe what the possible exits are, meaning what numbers people can dial while it's playing back a speech message, and then you can define your programming logic within the extensions.conf file. Very, very easy to do. You can have multiple people within a house, so you can have 5 or 6 voice over IP phones as an example. Each person in the house might have their own line. And based on the IVR, you might be able to route calls independently to each person in the house. Very cool.
Now, what if there's some other cool things that we didn't have time to show today? What are some of the other things that are common uses for Asterisk?
Sure. Well, Asterisk is a toolkit, so it gets used for a whole lot of things. There are people running Asterisk now in very, very large call centers, hundreds of seats. Asterisk is being used as a gateway to replace standard VoIP to PSTN type of things, where you're converting, maybe 100 calls of SIP and turning it into PRI channels or primary rate interface channels out to different carriers. People are using Asterisk as voicemail servers to replace their very expensive old iron type of voicemail systems. If you're going to pay $8,000 or $10,000 to upgrade your voicemail system, Asterisk is an extremely cost-effective way to do that with the same functionality. There's one fellow that I know that actually has programmed Asterisk to give math quizzes to his kids.
No way.
Yeah. And so,
is that the X10 stuff you were telling me about?
He's the same fellow that has his whole house hooked up through the Mr. Home program and has Asterisk tell him what time to take the garbage out, uses the speakerphone. He essentially is using Asterisk as a voice toolkit to notify him on his cell phone of certain things or to play back things over intercom systems in his house. So he's using Asterisk as an extension of other tools, and it works very well as a part of a much larger integrated system.
Now, what if I travel a lot and I'm on the road and I have a laptop? Is there any type of a way that I can connect to my Asterisk box to receive phone calls, or how does that work?
Sure. There are a variety of free soft clients, is what they're called, that speak SIP, or IAX, as a matter of fact, which is the Asterisk proprietary protocol, that you can run on your laptop, whether it's Windows, Macintosh, or Linux. And they look as if they are identical to this device here. SIP is kind of nice is because it doesn't matter where in the network it is. It looks like a device that's able to handle or both receive and make telephony calls. So having that on your laptop, as soon as you open up your laptop and register, you could make it so that your inbound house calls will fork so that they go two ways. They'll both ring this phone and ring your laptop phone at the same time as soon as you turn it on.
All right, so if I have my Asterisk box here in San Francisco, I fly to China, turn my laptop on, those calls will just automatically be rerouted to me
that's right.
when my laptop's running.
That's right, and you'll be able to make calls outbound on this line no matter where you happen to be seated.
What about conferencing? Is there a way to bridge multiple people calling into the same box?
There is a conferencing application. That's actually one of the other applications a lot of people use Asterisk for, is just by itself, where you can bridge 30, 40, 50 people together. Usually people would use it for much smaller purposes. But yeah, you could bridge 5 or 6 people together, again, avoiding the costs of some of these expensive per-minute-based telephony systems.
So if you don't have the bandwidth at home for something like that, because if you're going to be bridging that many people, is it common to see someone go out and rent a $99 server at one of those server farms and just set up their Asterisk box there?
Yeah, that's typically the case where you've got people who are using it for commercial purposes that are service providers of some sort, where they're providing a conference server, or they're providing outsourced voicemail services, as an example. Most businesses, though, will run it inside their office because they want it so that if their internet connection goes down, their desktop phones can still communicate with each other.
Right.
But it depends on what your model is as far as how you've got Asterisk servers distributed. You can also have multiple Asterisk servers talking to each other through a variety of really complex and really interesting protocols so that they exchange dial plans so that one Asterisk server knows what phone numbers are on the other one. Automatically and dynamically, very much like OSPF or other routing protocols.
That's so crazy. There's so many options you can do with this. Now, those configuration files, they looked a little confusing, but we're going to save all the ones that you created today. Yeah. So if anyone out there wants to download those, it's easy for them to get started.
Right. They're actually fairly small. The minimal Asterisk configuration files are 5 or 6 lines.
Yeah, I was going to say, those are just
they're very, very
basic.
basic.
File.
Some of the sample files they're kind of scary looking the first time you take a peek at them, but almost all the files in the directory you don't really use unless you really start to get into the individual dimensions of these different applications.
Right. All right, the last thing we have to do is obviously we need a way that we can connect this phone to the standard copper phone lines. If I want to call my parents across the country, I should be able to do that.
Sure.
And so how are we going to set that up?
Well, we have 2 options. We've described, we've got this line connected here, but the whole point of this is to try to see if we can reduce our costs. So what we're going to do is we're going to sign up with what's called an ITSP, or Internet Telephony Service Provider, and they're going to terminate the calls for us out onto the public switch network for a much lower rate and potentially with some additional flexibility. So the service provider we're going to use right now is called IAX, and they actually provide both SIP and IAX termination. While we are trying to get SIP working here in the studio, we of course ran into the problems that you'll hear quite frequently, which is that sometimes Asterisk doesn't like to be behind a net. And so we figured that most of our viewers are going to probably have some sort of situation like that. So we're going to try to solve that problem.
Yeah, when we say NAT, we were talking about, of course, like linkless router, network address translation, where it gives you an internal IP address, and it's kind of hard to punch through that wall.
We've only got one external address. So SIP works quite well, and actually it can work from behind a NAT. It's just in our particular circumstance, it took a little longer than anticipated. So we decided we're going to talk to a provider that actually has another protocol which works great through NAT, and that's IAX.
Okay.
And fortunately, there are plenty of IAX providers out there now. IAX is one, VoicePulse is another, and there are probably another 10 or 12 that are popping up out of the woodwork.
So IAX is going to give us the ability. We really don't have to go into the router and do any configuration or try and punch holes. It just kind of just works.
It just works.
Okay.
So what we did is we essentially added another configuration file, or actually modified the file called IAX.conf. And IAX.conf IAX.conf describes a channel, just like we described SIP channels with this. We're now going to describe another channel, another way we can send out calls, and add essentially a peer name in the IAX.conf file. And as you can see, it's probably only about 12 or so lines. Even though the IAX config file has a million options, you're never going to use most of them.
Right.
So we're going to stick with this fairly concise file. You'd need to go to TeleAX and then get sign up for an account. They charge by the minute. It's a pretty reasonable rate. As I said, there are other providers, so you can shop it around and see if you can get some better rate from somewhere else.
If you wanted to get rid of your standard copper line altogether, is there a way to just can you buy telephone numbers from them as well?
Most of these providers will not only actually terminate your calls out onto the public switch telephone network, but they'll sell you DIDs or direct inward dial numbers from pretty much any area code that you can think of. With the real exotic ones as the exception. I don't think it's hard to find an Alaska phone number, but pretty much everywhere else you can get a number.
Very cool.
And it's usually a couple dollars extra a month. So we've added this configuration now in the IAX.conf file, and we're going to go back into extensions.conf, which is where all of the processing of our calls occur, and we're going to essentially change the recording where we played back the monkeys, and we're just going to say, all right, instead of sending it to the monkeys, we're going to actually connect it using the dial statement. The dial statement will essentially just allow us to describe another channel that we're going to link this to.
Gotcha.
So right here we have dial, and then we're using IAX2 as the protocol, and then we have our authentication token here, and then TeleAX, which is the name of the peer which we've described in the IAX.conf file. And that's pretty much it. So we can pick up the phone, give it a shot.
All right. So I can just call my cell phone here, and this should just work, right?
Yep, give it a try. You can see it dialing out.
There we go.
Making progress.
It's giving there we go.
There we go. Okay. So now, as far as how you route calls around inside of Asterisk, there's a whole bunch of different options. These are just kind of the basics, but I think once people get the basics under their belt, they'll be able to figure out how you connect different SIP channels together, how you can connect it to the conferencing and everything else.
Now, if you wanted to bring multiple phone numbers into a single box, how would you go about adding those other lines?
Well, as an example, if you're buying them from an ITSP, you just sign up for them, and they'll send the calls to you via whatever protocol you'd like, either SIP or IAX.
And then you can choose Asterisk to route it in any way you'd like.
That's right. You can have the calls go however you'd like.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for creating all these files. I know that we're going to take all these configuration files that you've worked on today. We'll zip them up. We'll put them on the website along with a little article and let everyone download them so they don't have to go through all this process. They can kind of have a guideline to work with.
There are plenty of other resources out there. There's the VoIP-info.org site. There's, of course, Asterisk.org. And there's also the Asterisk Future of Telephony book, which O'Reilly has just published, which is an excellent resource for beginners.
Nice. One of the animal books, then.
Yep. They chose the starfish quite appropriately.
Very cool. All right. Well, thanks, John, so much. And if you want any more information about what we talked about today, you can view all the details on our website at Systm, that's SYSTM.org. Until next time, I'm Kevin Rose. See you later.